This is the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast, presented by thehoosier.com. Before we jump into this video, pause it right now and go subscribe to the Hoosier.com website, now a part of On3 Sports, for exclusive content covering the Indiana Hoosiers, including exclusive interviews, live recruiting updates, and much more. Make sure to join our community. We really appreciate it.
And Hoosier Nation, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button here on our YouTube page. We got plenty of more content on here, including more talking about the Hoosiers podcast episodes, recruiting highlights, press conferences, and much, much more. It literally takes 2 seconds. Just do it right now, get it over with, and then go on and let's enjoy this new episode.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Talking About the Hoosiers podcast, presented by the Hoosier. I'm joined by Zach Browning. Once again, another breaking news episode, Zach. Jason Drake, Drexel guard, has committed to play for the Hoosiers. What are your quick, instant reactions?
Well, I think it's another good addition. We've talked about Indiana's need to acquire bench pieces and guys that aren't necessarily going to start or play huge roles, and I think that's exactly what Jason Drake brings. He's a guy that can come in, fill a role for Indiana. He's not going to light it up. He's not going to be getting 25, 30-plus minutes a game. He's not going to be averaging 20 a night, but he's going to be able to come in, fill a role, and do a job for DeVries off the bench most likely, and that's a big get for Indiana because the Hoosiers, they need guys to fill roles right now.
Yeah, it's, a guy who's, you see the skill set. It's something, it's not like it's a new skill set he's bringing in. Solid passer. The three-point shooting has improved a bit, but it's someone who can come in and, be a difference maker off the bench, which was, that's the point of the transfer portal I guess this team is at. I think it is now spot number 9, I want to say, or 8, not including Luke Goody. So there's still some work left, but it's DeVries. We kind of see what the bones of this roster are going to look like going into next season.
You're exactly right. Again, it's filling a role. Drake can do a lot of different things. He's a versatile guard. He can score, go get himself a bucket if he needs to. He can go get a teammate a bucket if you need him to stand in the corner and catch and shoot. He can do that as well. You mentioned the three-point shooting, 39.6% a season ago on 3.1 attempts a game. It was a high usage, but his usage was a little bit different at Drexel. There was nights where he was the go-to guy where he would score 25. There was nights where he'd be kind of the off-ball guard, kind of a secondary scorer and stuff like that. But I do think it's important that he can be versatile. He can fill a role. He's not an elite defender, but he's aggressive enough defensively, solid enough defensively to where he's not going to be a liability on that end of the floor. But then he can just do so much offensively, whether it's shoot, whether it's play make, whether it's get to the basket and score, whether it's operate out of the pick and roll. He can do a lot of different things and fill a lot of different roles. So he's versatile in that sense that he can be plugged and played in a lot of different lineups. He can play as a primary ball handler. He can play as a secondary ball handler where he's playing off the ball, playing in the corner maybe, and just being asked to shoot. So I think that's where his value comes in for DeVries in Indiana.
Yeah, and you look at him, it's someone he can play as the main point guard or can play alongside a Tatum Connerway or a Connor Enright. And, Indiana, we've looked at, the past couple of years, Zach, you and I both been covering this team, and we've seen there's, the lack of guards and guard depth of guys who can really handle the point guard role. And DeVries is going really the exact opposite direction. You now have 3 clear guys who can run the point on the roster already, and it wouldn't completely surprise me if he adds a 4th.
You're exactly right. And the numbers that I want to jump into real quick, when you're talking about him and you're talking about Drake as a primary ball handler, a guy that's going to run the point guard, that's going to run the offense, 23.9 assist rate last year, 16.4 turnover rate. The assist rate isn't as high as a guy like Connerway or a guy like Enright, but the turnover rate is actually pretty decent, 16.4% turnover rate for a guy whose usage rate was above 25%. That's really solid for Drake on Drexel last year. So he's shown that he can operate the point guard spot and be an efficient ball handler, not necessarily dishing out dozens of assists, but he can dish out assists while also limiting his turnovers as well. Then on the flip side, if you need him to be a little bit more of a scorer, I believe it was his isolation efficiency ranked in around the 85th percentile last season when he was asked to pretty much just go get a basket in an isolation setting. He was in the 85th percentile for that. So he's shown he can do that. He can beat somebody off the dribble, get to his spot, get to the basket and whatnot. Then the third option, I guess, is if you need him to just space the floor, catch and shoot. Yeah. He was in the 88th percentile in effective field goal percentage on catch and shoot shots last season. So he's shown that he can do all three of those things, whether it's play make, ball handler, and keep those turnovers low, or if it's along the lines of catching and shooting or going and getting himself a bucket out of isolation. He's shown he can do all of those things, which makes him able to play with a guy like Connor Way, play with a guy like Enright. You could see him play the 1 or the 2 in some of those lineups. And then you're exactly right. Indiana may not be done in the portal specifically on the guard front. You know, they're probably going to go out and look for a big, maybe some bigger wings as well. But the conglomeration of guards that Darren DeVries has built already out of the portal, very serviceable, I believe, at least. That would be the best way to put it.
Yeah, and you look at the shooting across the board. I think really the only guy I would say is maybe a below average shooter would be Tatum Connerway. And, you know, Josiah Miles, Connor Enright, the numbers aren't the prettiest, but Connor Enright, you know, he showed in past years he can shoot the ball from distance. And Josiah Miles, I think the number I want to say was 33, around there. And it's, you know, that's not the best number when you're looking at it, just pure numbers, but you watch the games, he's taking, you know, tough, difficult off the dribble threes. And it's someone in an offense where he's not, you know, the main guy like he was in North Florida. There's going to be so much spacing. And Jason Drake, Connor, like the spacing is going to be, you know, it's not going to be night and day from next year, just based off the roster. You have so many shooters around. And, you know, we've talked about in the past, you know, there's still a need for a true center. But now you're adding a true center where they're going to have spacing to work down low, which we really haven't seen over the last couple of years with Indiana basketball.
And that's one of the biggest things, and it was something that Darren DeVries brought up at his introductory press conference. It didn't take him long for him to bring it up. He talked about talent versus fit, and he said, yes, you have to acquire good players. You have to have good players. We've seen that. Lamar Wilkerson, good player. His son, Tucker DeVries, Reed Bailey, those guys are good players. But you have to have fit as well, and I think that's more so where a guy like Jason Drake comes into the fold. He's ranked the number 512th player in the portal. He's not exactly jumping off the page as far as the rankings are concerned, but he brings fit because he can do so many different things. He's going to be able to come in, and I'm assuming he's understanding his role is going to be 10 to 15 minutes a game, doing whatever he needs to help this team win. And I think that is what the biggest thing that Darren DeVries preached at his introductory press conference and is now showing based on who he's landing and who he's getting in the portal.
Yeah, I mean, you look to just comparing to last, you know, Indiana's last transfer class, you had a lot of guys who were at the top of the class, highly ranked, highly touted transfers. But it was like, how is all these pieces going to fit? And we saw it didn't fit. A guy like Cannon Carlisle was a top 15, top 20 transfer across the country. And he, you know, we struggled in a, you know, a secondary role where he was coming from a place where he was one of the guys and he wasn't last year, and he struggled as a result. And it seems like Darren DeVries' approach is a little more, you know, not get the best players and we'll just make it work. It's let's see fit and value at each position and try to build a roster, build a team rather than just, you know, assembling the best group of players.
They're exactly right. And that takes me into something I wanted to talk about as far as the big is concerned, because there's a world out there. I know it's probably unlikely. Indiana probably does go out and find a rim running, rim protecting 5 that's 6'10", 6'11", 7 foot that can do all those things, rebound, predict the rim. There's also a world, though, where Indiana just loads up on long wings and long guards. Like Jason Drake is a long guard. Josiah Miles, another guy that pops into your head immediately. And DeVries just loads up on long wings and long guards and says, hey, Reed Bailey, you go run the 5. We'll switch everything 1 through 5. We'll switch everything. We'll just be athletic defensively. And then if we go up against a big, if Indiana goes up against a big that is really going to look to pound the ball inside, or a team that's really going to look to pound the ball inside, Indiana will just double everything down low and just send multiple bodies, just fly around defensively, make everything frantic. It kind of reminds me of the Houston Rockets, the NBA playoffs underway. It reminds me of what the Rockets do. They don't necessarily have any massive rim protecting, rim stopper down low, but they're just athletic, frantic, long arms, long, athletic, 1 through 5. There's a world out there where DeVries doesn't necessarily go out and get that elite starting rim protecting 5. There's a world out there where Reed Bailey starts the 5, but yeah, we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the Rockets because I was going to compare it to a different Houston team. I was going to compare it to the Cougars. You look at the roster this year. I think they had one guy above 6'10", a freshman who really didn't see the floor, and you know most of the guy it was 6'8". Like was kind of like the taller, like really guys in the rotation. And, you know, you watch Houston, they were one of the most dominant physical teams in the country. They had no issues when it came to rebounding. It was, you know, we've all seen the famous clip of Kelvin Sampson's practices of them like diving for loose balls. And they're, them playing, I guess, a smaller brand. It's weird I say small because they're so long, and you mentioned they had so many big wings, and it seems like Darren DeVries could be, he could follow that path. As Reed Bailey would have been the tallest player in the rotation on Houston's, national runner-up team. So is Indiana going, for that type of roster? I mean, you look at the wings we've mentioned, Tucker DeVries, Josiah Miles. Lamar Wilkerson's kind of that in between, like he's a bigger guard, smaller wing. So it's, probably going to play the 2 guard, it seems. But Indiana, I feel like there's a couple more wings you're going to add. And I do think there is a center. It's just a question of, is it going to be a big time addition where it's going to start alongside Reed Bailey, or is it someone who's going to come off the bench and, be a different look, maybe someone to throw at the bigger centers in the Big Ten?
Yeah, and only time will tell. It is interesting because you bring up Houston. I mean, you think of a guy like Juwan Roberts. That dude was one of the best rebounders in the country last season at 6'8". JoJo Tugler was also important in that run for Houston, and he was about 6'7", 6'8", but just long arms, athletic. The only issue with that, and it's not a knock on DeVries, he has to be able to get his entire team to buy into a system like that. That's not one of those things where you can have 3, 4 good defenders out there and 2, 3 of them maybe are bought in defensively, running around for 25, 30 minutes a game and putting out that much effort on a January game in New Jersey or something like that. That takes defensive buy-in. That takes a buy-in collectively as a unit. So it's not exactly an easy thing to do. You can't just throw out 5 super long, super athletic guys and say, hey, go play defense, go run around for 30 minutes and make it difficult for the other team to score. That takes a buy-in 1 through 5. 1 through really like 10, you got to have a deep bench. You got to be able to go to that depth in a system like that. And as we've talked about, only time will tell. I do think there will be a center. There will be a 7-footer or somebody around there. There will be a guy bigger than Reed Bailey that comes in. It'll just be a matter of if they're starting, if Reed Bailey starts, and then who knows? Maybe you bring in a starting center and he's not in the closing lineup. Maybe it's Reed Bailey and more of an athletic lineup that closes. And who knows? Indiana has shown that they can be versatile. Darren DeVries is building a roster that can be versatile. So maybe it changes from game to game on who closes, who doesn't, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at across the Big Ten, there's some teams that are, going the smaller, quicker approach. And then you have the Illinois who are going to start 2 7-footers next year with the, brothers, Zvonimir Visic and Tomislav Visic. So you got to be able to match up with everyone in the Big Ten. That's why this conference is so difficult to compete in. And, people are going to talk about Purdue loading up and all this stuff. And Purdue's roster looks really good. I'm not going to, get into that fully. But the versatility that Darren DeVries is building, I do want to see him add that center just because I feel you need that body to be able to throw. Reed Bailey, if he's not going to be the only big. I just can't see a world where he's the only big, because if you have one real big on a roster in the Big Ten, it's going to be, he might have a great year, but it's going to be physically demanding and brutal. And I think Darren DeVries is too smart to do that this year.
You're exactly right. And again, everybody that Indiana's brought in, maybe aside from Jason Drake, he's a little bit on the smaller side as far as guards are concerned. I believe 6'2", 190. But outside of Drake, Drew, is there anybody on this Indiana roster that doesn't have A, positional size, and B, positional versatility? I mean, you look up and down the roster, they can all play multiple different positions. They can all do multiple different things. They're all big for their quote-unquote position. Even Tatum Conaway, he's 6'3", but he's long, he's big, he's physical. Lamar Wilkerson can play the 1 or the 2. Tucker DeVries can play a number of different positions. All these guys have not only positional size, they're big, they're long, athletic, but positional versatility as well. So we're going to see how this roster shakes out. And Indiana could look a number of different ways. They can go with a number of different lineups. They can do a number of different things. I think that'll be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, there's already potential for a small ball lineup where Lamar Wilkerson at 6'5" is playing the 3, alongside of Tucker DeVries, with like Reed Bailey as a 5, with, maybe Conaway and Drake and like the versatility, we see there's going to be a ton of different lineups. And it's not going to be like last year where, you're fighting for, get one big only lineups and like fans are begging. It's going to be, sometimes we're probably going to see this team go small where Bailey's going to play the 5 at times. Other times they'll might go big and Bailey might play the 4. But it's going to be really interesting to watch as, DeVries continues to fill out the roster, because I want to say there are now 5 spots left, but one of them is, barring Luke Goody. So it could be 4 if Goody returns, but we're gonna, that's just something to monitor each day as, the NCAA tries to figure out what they're doing with all these players who are trying to get another year.
Yeah, Luke Goody's an interesting situation. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen there. It won't happen probably for another handful of weeks. I mean, there's still, I was looking at yesterday, the amount of guys in the portal that don't have eligibility left or that require a extra year, require a waiver. It's just crazy with how all the eligibility works and how the NCAA doesn't seem to have a firm grip or handle on all of it right now.
Yeah. And I mean, it's going to be really fun to watch. We're going to have, all the coverage of the NCAA settlement with the House. That's all going to be on the On3 site. So I want to remind people because, when we say subscribe to the Hoosier On3, you're not just subscribing to us. You get all the exclusive On3 stuff from the national reporters like Pete Nakos, Joe Tipton, Jamie Shaw, all their stuff too, included for that $1 for the first month. So guys, if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the Hoosier. Follow the Hoosier On3 on X and check out the Hoosier.com website. Guys, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, liking us, following us on Spotify. It means the world if you like the podcast. And we're giving back to you guys. I don't know if you saw this, Zach, but On3 has a code for Rowback. You can get some nice Indiana polos, sweatshirts, all that stuff. Really great products. 20% off. The code's On3. That's it. You just put it in when you go to checkout and you get 20% off your whole purchase. So make sure you're doing that, guys. We appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in to Talking About the Hoosiers podcast. We'll be back.